Our fight to eradicate corruption, maladministration, unethical leaders, and the abuse of taxpayers' money by those in power continues. It's fresh, it's fearless, and focused. The Outer Hour, where your voice matters. Hello and welcome to the special Focus Outer Hour, where we focus on the city of Johannesburg. And if you're a resident in the city of Johannesburg, you'll want to pay attention to this broadcast. Why? Because your properties are about to be re-evaluated. What does that mean for you? What could the implications be? What could go right? What could go wrong? Well, Outer is keeping an eye on this process, and we got Julius Kleinans and we have Tsepo Khaladi in the studio with us tonight to talk about these municipal valuations. How's it, guys? Good to have you with us.
Always nice to be here.
Nice to be here. Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Well. Are we staring? I mean, I want to take us back to, when was it? 2018, the last time property valuations were done in Johannesburg, and there were tons of people who were unhappy with the increases. Julius, take us back to 2018 and tell us what happened and what we should be looking out for, at least.
No, sure. If you look at some of the increases, we're speaking about an average of 30% that the property rates hiked over this time period in this valuation roll. Some property rates increased by over 100%. So you can just imagine that if you were paying 500 Rand for your property rates, all of a sudden it becomes $1,000. I don't know about you, but not everyone can afford it in this time, and that was even pre-COVID time. So I think people were hard hit.
All right. When is the evaluation process starting, Tsepo? And give us a bit of an idea of timelines here.
The valuation process, in fact, there was a media statement that went out from the city of Joburg on the 7th of November, alerting people or informing them that there's a looming deadline, and they're talking about a deadline of the 25th of November, which effectively gives the residents or the property owners of the metro only 19 days within which to submit all the required information, which I think, in my view, is a very a short space of time within which to respond to this.
Am I correct in saying that the new valuations for your property, if you live in Johannesburg, will happen next year sometime?
So that is correct. So legislatively, it will probably happen in the beginning of next year, in 2023. And then this process will follow the whole valuation cycle, where information will be made public. People will be afforded the opportunity to look at what their valuations are on their properties, and then potentially object such. But it's very important that people follow these deadlines, because if you do it too late, you don't really have an opportunity to object. And what's very important in this is this speaks to the budget that the city is preparing for the consecutive years to follow. So whatever happens at the end of this cycle of this valuation roll, on the 1st of July 2023, the new property rates will be applied, and at the end of that month you will get a bill that will reflect that rate.
Whether you participate in this process up front and say, right, this is what's happening on my property, this is what my property consists of, etc., whether you do that or not, your property will get a value, perhaps a new value, perhaps a raised value in July next year.
Exactly. And I think that's where the confusion also comes in. As Tsepo rightfully said, that is the communication that is on the website of the city of Johannesburg, but that is pre-evaluation. It's not even in the legislative framework. So not sure what the city tried to do here. Maybe they tried to be proactive in asking residents to voluntarily participate. But if you want to do that, communicate effectively. Tell people exactly what you need from them. Make it convenient for people to submit such information, and make sure that you give them sufficient time to actually do so. But I think the convenience is key. You cannot expect someone to drive to the mid-city and go participate on something on your terms. You must bring the information to them, and with the click of the button, they need to be able to give you accurate information.
Well, there's a question for you that you can answer down in the comment section and chat with the moderators from outside tonight. Do you know anything about this process? I mean, are you caught unawares as we start this program tonight and tell you that your property is about to be valued in Johannesburg and there'll be a new value next year? Did you know that? Number one. And then number two, do you know anything about the participation process in play that you can submit your, what do you submit if you're worried about this? I mean, there are people who were caught out in 2018, got a rates bill, and all of a sudden the property went from 500,000 Rand to 800,000 and the rates shot up and everyone was whinging. Is that what we're trying to avoid here, Julius?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we wanted to try and avoid, because when you get that bill, it's too late because you didn't apply your mind and participated in that process of the city. So then it's already legislated, implemented, and you're not going to get away from that.
Let me ask you, Tsepo, what would you be worried about if you were a Johannesburg resident and you owned a property in Johannesburg?
Obviously, it's exorbitant hikes. It will. I mean, people are reeling in debt as we speak. I mean, the two COVID years, 2020, 2021, were not easy years for anybody. And if we come out of this with high property rates, it's going to have a real impact on the people. And, we're trying to avoid that and ensure that the process is as fair as possible and accurate as possible. That is why it's critical that people are given sufficient time to respond to this and be able to supply the correct information that will ensure that at the very end, the properties are rated properly and accurately.
To be clear, we're not talking about the rates increase here, the yearly rates increase, which forms part of this increase that you may see. We're talking about the valuation of your property specifically at this moment.
Yeah, it's specifically property rates.
Yes.
So it's the property rates.
This is where it gets confusing. Okay,
Yeah.
so I've got a property, and then it gets valued, and that value goes onto the valuation roll.
That's right.
So my property will sit there, will say, Tom's property is worth $1 million. That is going to be revalued. And then the new value I will find out next year.
So on your property rates tariff, that's correct. So what they do is they work out a specific calculation
Off that amount that the value they say my property is worth.
What they say the value is.
Sure.
So what's supposed to happen is they need to get independent audits on these valuations done and professional people to go and value the properties. But just the exorbitance of this.
900,000
It's almost
properties
a million
in
properties in Joburg. And let's be honest, if you want to do a proper fair valuation of my property, come to my property, look at my property and value it fairly. But is that reasonable? If you look at the city, is that even achievable to do that in the process of 6 months? I don't believe that. So I think that's where it gets quite important, and that's what we need to focus on here. And that's why it's important for people to proactively participate correctly to ensure that the city doesn't have a foot to stand on should they overvalue your property.
Why is this important, or the value of your property important? Because your rates bill will be determined off the value of your property.
That's right.
And how does that work?
Yeah, well, the municipality based it on a certain formula where the value of the rent that's on the value of the property, and then there's a scientific formula that they calculate there to arrive at your property rate. And again, you've got to bear in mind that people are not even aware of certain exclusions and exemptions that also applies there, and certain rebates as well that you could qualify for. And I think in their media statement, again, they're silent on those things to be able to alert and educate people about the things that they need to know, when they come up with the actual value of their properties. Because I think it's critical that people are aware of those things, and so that they can give accurate information back to the municipality to determine their valuations at the end.
But to be clear, there will be a rates increase, as there is every year.
Absolutely.
The city will make sure of that.
What type of increase are we looking at for the next financial year?
Yeah, it's difficult to say because we have to see what the formula is, as Tsepo mentioned. But just to give you a heads up, it's something like, you take the market value of your property, you times it by 0.008 or whatever the formula is, and then you get an amount and you divide it by 12. So then you get your monthly rate cost. That's basically more or less how that formula works. But no. I think one can expect most likely around 4 to 5% per annum
increase in the coming year.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound too bad unless your property goes from $1 million to $2 million on the valuation roll, in which case the 5% is a whole lot more. Yeah. All right, and that's what we're trying to avoid here. And is this what you're trying to make Johannesburg residents aware of, Julius?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think, firstly, let's be honest, we want to see a bang for our buck. We want to make sure that whatever money we have to pay on top of what we're already paying goes somewhere, and we want to see a difference in the city. So I think it's going to be very difficult for people to digest the fact that they need to pay more money in the future. However, inflation occurs and things get more expensive, and the city must make money in the process as well. We don't want the city to abuse that position, and we want people to be in a position to also make sure that they get a fair value and a rate out of it.
So the objective here is to avoid what happened in 2018 when people got their rates bills and saw the value of their property had shot up without them even knowing, number one. And then number two, to make sure that this is done fairly. And also give people... I would say give people time. I mean, Tsepo, you were talking about the closing date to submit property information to the City of Johannesburg, the 25th of November. I mean, that's...
Yeah, it's during the course of this week. It's now, exactly. That's precisely why we as OUTA and Ken specifically, Ken is the Community Action Network by OUTA, that we're calling on the municipality to relook at the timeline as well and extend the deadline to at least around the 15th of December. You know, that will give the property owners sufficient time within which to respond and submit accurate information to the city.
I think that's the word, isn't it? Accurate. That's what you want, is an accurate valuation.
Not a rushed thing.
And if you own a property, you want an accurate value on that property.
Exactly, and I think sadly in South Africa, direct and indirect implications. I don't want to bore you, but just to get to a couple of facts quick. We see politicians coming in at elections. They bringing in more people. Urbanization also occurs, so more people flock to the cities. And your municipality is legislatively required to provide basic services to those in need. Even people in informal settlements, they cannot just get rid of them. They must move them and provide alternative kind of accommodation to them. This all adds to expenses, things that you haven't planned for, things that you don't have money for. And that's the kind of vicious cycle that we find ourselves in the complexity of this process, and the lack of people understanding how to participate has added to that. And that's very important, because municipalities know that people don't necessarily want to participate, or they make it very difficult for people to participate. And then you just get these very bad surprises of exorbitant fees on your bill.
Let's create a hypothetical situation quickly, because the natural assumption is if you own a property, the value stays the same or it increases a bit every year. Or if your area becomes a hot area to buy in, then it may increase a bit beyond the inflation rate. But what happens if your property drops in value? And why would a property drop in value? And what do you do if you're one of these Johannesburg residents whose property was worth 2 million, now it's worth 1 million? How does that happen? Or how could it happen?
Tom, you know, when I was a young man, I was taught by my mom that, you know, buy more property than cars, you know, because properties never go down in value. And as I grow older, I realized, no, it's not often the case. You know, there are times when properties can actually fall or really come down in value, you know. An example would be, here you are in an affluent suburb as an example, and a squatter camp, I mean, gets plucked. I mean, with this urbanization that's happening in our country, then they open a squatter camp right next to you. What will happen to that property? Invariably, the value is going to come down significantly. And, you know, so it can come down, definitely. And it's critical that when that process happens, it takes into account things like that can potentially happen.
There must be pockets in Johannesburg where people have seen degradation happen inside the areas they live in, or perhaps the services just come to naught and the roads are messed, the crime is shot up and the values go down. So if you're in one of those areas, we'd love to hear from you. If you feel your property has lost value over the last 4 years, pop your story in the comment section down below the video so OUTA can take a look at that. But if you're one of these people who feels their property has lost value or has not increased in value, what should you be doing right now?
Oh, look, that's very important for you to participate in this valuation rule that's coming up next year. One has to get a fair market value on your house. Some of the best ways of doing it is to withdraw some information from Lighthouse, their website, for instance. I think it costs like $150, and you get your property and the prices of a couple of properties, what they were sold for in the area. So it gives you a bit of an idea. Obviously, getting an estate agent out to give you a better perspective on the real value. Because what the city does, or what municipalities do, is they get these professional valuers, and they go and value, obviously not house per house, but
they'll take a suburb or an area.
Exactly, and they do it under those particular circumstances in that specific time. And that doesn't fluctuate as the world does. Because let's be honest, COVID happened. That's become kind of a buying market because, lending rates were low, all that kind of stuff happened. Now all of a sudden we see this global economic meltdown, interest rates go up, and price hikes. So, but people can't really afford properties at the moment. So, but the city might value your property in a different way. And
I'm just thinking of properties, and we've got some expensive areas in Johannesburg and some really expensive properties. Automatically when you talk about these issues, you think about the ordinary man in the street. But some people are not ordinary. They don't have ordinary properties in the street. They've got a property that's worth 30 million rand. But in a bad economic climate, it's not worth 30, it's worth 15 to 20. And so there's a huge difference in value.
No, exactly, and it must be based on fair market value. You cannot expect people to thumbs up because.
All right, Julius, but how does the council work out what fair market value is? Tebo, how do you know how they do it?
Now, look, there's no other way other than to get a sound valuer, a professional, qualified valuer that can actually give a fair value of the property. I don't see any other way you can be able to. All right,
and we're trusting the city of Johannesburg.
Other than just thumbs up the figure.
All right, so we're trusting the city of Johannesburg and their companies and their contractors that they use for valuations, that they'll do the job and get it right, and it will be accurate.
Yes, that's a difficult one because we trust government. So it's really a difficult one, and we've seen in Ekurhuleni last year where it was very dubious.
Yes,
the people who got the tenders. In fact,
we ran some outer hours on this where people were coming in with comments saying my property value shot up to this amount and doubled in some cases.
As I understand it, there was over 18,000 objections in the city on those valuations, and that valuation roll seized or tried to seize a 2 billion rand increase in revenue to the city. So think about it this way. A municipality must have money to operate and do its business. However, it always looks like the cities and the municipalities are looking for more ways to make money. They're not supposed to be profitable. They're supposed to break even. And we believe that the cities must rather start looking at where they can save costs instead of increasing.
All right. So in a nutshell, and there's more I want to discuss, but in a nutshell, there's a valuation process on the go. If you live in Johannesburg and own a property in Johannesburg, your property will receive a new value next year. You have a chance to submit what goes on in your property, what it's used for, the extent of it, etc., to the council, and you asking for an extension on this 25th of November deadline. Just help me out with what you send to the council.
Yeah, so let's clarify that. So the City of Johannesburg's council communicated this process very vaguely. What they've communicated is not a legislative process. They tried to give people the opportunity to submit information before the legislative process starts. Now, however noble that is, I don't know, because it was not properly communicated and very vague. And in fact, even the places where you can submit, they're talking about objections, which is very misleading. So this deadline is not important. It is not necessary. So we don't have to push the city to do that because it doesn't form part of the formal valuation process next year. But from the communication information that was available and to the disposal to the public on their websites, we had no choice but to intervene, because we've also seen how government has run roughshod over process in the past, giving people these increases and surprises that they cannot object because they're in process of.
So hold on, right at the beginning, we gave you an opportunity to submit your valuation.
But you never knew about it. And the stealth mode.
And always around Christmas time. Why is it always around December?
Stealth mode, and that's what raises the red flags.
Okay.
I've spoken to the MMC of Finance, and she clarified that this is not part of the formal process. And but I also told her that we are going to watch this space and participate in it and create the opportunity for people to do that much more meaningfully. So hopefully the city will come to the party on this one, because they will not get away with
crazy
these things
increases on property value.
It's not fair. But I just want to also explain something. There's a difference between valuations and recategorization of properties. I think that's also something
let's
people
chat
need to
about
consider.
that for a second. Let's say I'm sitting on a plot outside of a suburb, and I've got a plot and it's zoned, what would it be, agricultural?
Yeah, that's usually
Why
how
does that
people
become
buy.
difficult? I mean, I've been sitting on a plot for 20 years, grow a couple of millies in the corner for my own consumption. The rest of it is just grassland.
Yeah, that's,
You would think that that's simple.
It sounds like a nice lifestyle, but what was rated agricultural in the past might now be rated as residential. So you must make sure that you can have sufficient proof that you are using it for agricultural purposes to some extent. Because if you just live there because you love nature, you will be whacked with a property.
Has the city
rates
spoken about reclassification?
categorization?
Recategorization.
Yeah.
Anything coming from the city of Johannesburg on what their policy is on recategorization in the next year? Or is
Nothing communicated like that yet, but that's something to look out for as well. And I think this is also speaking from a city's behalf, that it's very important for us to also be honest. You cannot start a business in a residential area and expect to pay residential rates. You have to pay business rates on that. And then business tariffs and all those things come into play as well. That's why there's bylaws. It's to ensure good governance. So you get people who try to take a shortcut as well, naughty, but they will get whacked as well.
Let's talk about exclusions or rebates for a second. I think, Tsepo, you mentioned that a lot of people are unaware that they may not qualify for a rebate, or in some cases 100% rebate or exclusion.
No, we're talking about exemptions, really, as opposed to rebates.
Okay.
Rebates is 350,000 rands that every property will definitely get on the first million, obviously.
All right, so if your property is worth $1 million, there's a rebate of 350 that comes off it, and the value and your rates will, that calculation you mentioned earlier, will come off the 650.
Yes.
If my arithmetic
Then
is
obviously
correct.
you get exemptions for retired people, disabled people and all that. I mean, they definitely won't be paying the similar rate that ordinary people would.
So if you're running an animal charity, or you're a retired person, or you're looking after children, and I think child-headed households qualify
or
for
you're
this.
a church or
There's a whole list of this,
Absolutely.
which you could get at the City of Johannesburg's website, I'd imagine. Right, so you could qualify for an exemption.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's very important for people to follow the processes and bylaws, because we've seen that schools also got an exemption, and then all of a sudden schools this year in the same city of Joburg got whacked by 3-4 times
Because
the
they're
property rates,
businesses.
because now all of a sudden it's businesses,
Okay.
and that was classified over all schools. So we must watch these things very closely.
Now, this may seem like a naive question, or perhaps it's a loaded question. Let's say my property is worth $1 million. I get the 350 rebate, and then I got that 0.whatever% calculation you were talking about earlier on, divided by 12 to get my monthly rates bill, and it works out to, I think, on a property of R1 million, around 4,500 Rand a month in rates. What am I paying that money for? What is? I mean, I mean, it sounds like a silly question, but what is that for? Because I still pay for refuse removal.
Yeah,
What's the rates and taxes bill for?
that's a good question. Property rates basically goes into the bucket, so that covers general expenses in any municipality. If you look at water tariffs and waste tariffs, those kind of things, they go for that specific purpose, or supposed to. The question we need to ask ourselves is, do we believe that the 9.9% increase in water tariffs in 2022 gave us cleaner water and more sustainable water?
That's the big question, isn't it? So if you're paying $500 a month for rates and taxes and some money for water, you've got no problem paying that money if you get in the service delivery out of government.
Absolutely. Exactly. I think Joburg saw water shedding properly in 2022 after an almost 10% rate hike. So yes, very good question. What are we paying for? And I think that's what everyone needs to ask. Because if we pay more and more all the time, are things getting better? Because I doubt that.
How do you assess the situation?
Look at the amount of water that gets lost, to leakages and all that. Because that, at the end of the day, it comes back to the property ratepayers. They, at the end of the day, have to pay for that. And, that's where municipalities have to ensure that they cap all these leaks to ensure that there's no water loss and that type of thing, because ultimately it's into the pocket of property owners.
What's your message to property owners in Johannesburg, Julius?
I think it's, this is a wake-up call. Seriously, it's a wake-up call. It's very important for people to follow this process and participate. Yes, it's inconvenient, but it's much less inconvenient than what you're going to pay.
How do you follow it? How do I follow this process?
So ALTA's going to continue communicating. From, say, January, February, we will let people know to participate. So please put in your calendar to even look on our website and social media platforms. But people need to follow the process, the steps that we're going to apply, and give people the opportunity to do that. Submit the information and make sure that you do it accurately. And we will guide everyone on that process in due course.
And Tsepo, if July 2023 comes along and my property's been hopelessly overvalued, in my opinion, will there be an objection process or an ability to deal with council and say, hey, I think you've made a mistake here? Come 2023?
Yeah, obviously, once the valuation roll, it's out there. People will be given 30 days within which to object, and urge people to make sure that they go back, have a look at the valuation roll, and if they're not happy with where their properties have been valued, it's critical for them that within that turnaround time of 30 days that they address that, and the property valuer will then relook at it and ensure that the value is accurately reflected in the roll, or in the supplementary roll, so to say.
All right, so don't panic just yet, but forewarned is forearmed.
Absolutely.
That's very important. If people don't object in that space, that 30 days, they won't be able to oppose or challenge the city.
See, our friends from Ekurhuleni that live in Ekurhuleni know all about this, don't they? And we just haven't experienced that in Johannesburg yet, at least not to the same degree.
It was a privilege to work with that community, and with the 18,000 people that objected, I think they did the right thing.
What is OUTA doing in all of this, Julius? You did say that you were engaging and you'd opened the door to the council and were talking to them. What kind of discussions are you having with the city of Johannesburg, and how are you representing residents of Johannesburg in this matter?
Thank you. Yeah, Tom, I think it's very important. We're seeing coalition governments and political spats. We see people being in power that changes every 2-3 months. So we cannot predict what the future holds. What our message is to the city, and it's very clear, we act on behalf of residents, and we're not going to get bothered about the politics of the day. It's very important that the city serves its shareholders. People pay for something, and from a consumer point of view, they need to get something in return. And that should be at a higher standard and quality. And we want to make sure that there's meaningful participation and that residents as shareholders have a proper say in what happens in the business of this government.
We'll pop two website addresses rather, up on screen for you. One is OUTA's website address. You can go along and keep up to date with the latest projects, and as Julius said, keep up to date with this particular matter by keeping up to date with the website, outa.co.za, and then we'll pop the City of Johannesburg's link up in the comment section for you to go to. You can go and have a look and see if you qualify for exemptions, as well as taking a look at the specifics of this. But the closing date to submit property information to the city is 25th of November 2022. OUTA is asking the city for an extension on that. OUTA will keep you updated as far as that is concerned, and then the results and the valuation roll will happen around 1st of July 2023. So we'll be keeping you updated on the OUTA hours. I'm sure OUTA will keep its supporters updated on the website. Anything else that I've missed out on that you'd like to add? We'll start with you, Tsepo.
Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything from my side.
Okay.
I'm quite happy. And as you rightly say, from our side, we'll keep informing people. We'll update them right up to the implementation date of the 1st of July. We'll always, throughout the process, we'll be updating them in terms of where we are and what needs to be happening.
Great. Julius?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate everyone's support and, people listening to this. But please don't let it stop there. Please engage with your neighbors. Let people know about this, your local residents association. Get involved and please participate in this process. Don't get a bad bill in July next year that you weren't prepared for. So I think that's very important, and thank you just for the support.
Right, and there you have it from Julius Kleinhans. Julius is the Executive Manager of Social Innovation at OUTA, and joining Julius in the studio, Ekurhuleni. Thanks for joining. This is your first time on the OUTA Hour, so welcome to the OUTA Hour, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
As you'll notice, we're half an hour in, and that's where we're going to stop it tonight because, like most other businesses in every intersection in South Africa, we've been affected by load shedding. So instead of running no program this evening, we decided we would pre-record a half-hour program and focus on a specific issue for you. Hope you've enjoyed that. Hope you've enjoyed chatting to the moderators in the comment section down below. Remember, your comments and your questions are appreciated and noted. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday night at 7 p.m. for a full OUTA Hour. 7 p.m. is the date. Don't be late. I'm Tom London.
Our fight to eradicate corruption, maladministration, unethical leaders, and the abuse of taxpayers' money by those in power continues. It's fresh, it's fearless, and focused. The OUTA Hour, where your voice matters.